you.
Let me play an intro video first.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Okay. So it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Go ahead, Nomsa.
All right.
Halfway.
Thank you. Anyways, I'm just going to be saying thank you so much to Dell Methods, Eastern Media, for having sponsored us and giving us this opportunity to host you this afternoon. To begin with, I would like to introduce all my speakers today on my panel. Our first speaker is Pastor Robert Edwards. I think most of you are familiar with Pastor Robert Edwards. Born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, Elder Robert F. Edwards has been a Californian for some 20 plus years. He graduated from Oakwood College, now Oakwood University, with a bachelor's degree in religion and a minor in history. He obtained a Master of Divinity from Andrews Theology Seminary. His pastoral experience began as an infiltration pastor to a city where, with God's help, he started an Adventist church in Owensboro, Kentucky. During this period, he developed a youth program at a local community center. The church was planted, and from there he matriculated to Andrews University Seminary and then to a 3 in California. Was left to be an associate pastor at Hyattsville, Maryland for 2 years. However, once again, he came back to Southern California and then become one of the evangelists for the conference. He has also served in numerous times as an interim. As of October 2018, another chapter of his life started as he was elected as vice president of the Black Ministries of Southeastern California Conference. His 35 years of ministry has been filled with adventure. Elder Edwards has been married to love for 37 years. Denise, retired public school administrator, educator, and a current professor at University of Riverside. They have 2 beautiful daughters, Ivona and Kayla. They
yanyu.
I said her name right. Okay. Northern California. She's a representative of Northern California Conference of the SDA, currently serving as California Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Women's Ministry, and it now represents Angela's attentions are on creating and providing safe spaces within the church culture. Angela has an MSW from California State University, Sacramento. She is co-founder of the Rites of Passage Youth Program, Young Ladies and Men's Ministry at Capital City SDA in Sacramento, California. She delights to share with others the abundant grace of God. Welcome, Sister.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is an associate professor of public health in the School of Nursing and Health Professions at Langston University in the state of Oklahoma, where he teaches
Thank you.
and he also, it says here, Dr. T. Zemiri is an ordained minister of the SDA Worldwide Church. Currently, he serves as the corporate spiritual director in a healthcare institution, which I believe he's the one that runs it, he owns it, as well as adjunct instructor for Loma Linda University. And start. To begin with, I would like to just kind of speak to my to the panelists. But before I do that, let me introduce myself. I almost forgot about myself. My name is Dr. Nomsa Kolinchali. I am a psychotherapist, been practicing since 2006, and I'm based in San Bernardino, California. I enjoy working with others and finding ways in which we can help our community. I'm going to start with, I was going to start with Dr. Zemiri, but I think he is not able to log in. I'm not sure what's going on. Dr. Zemiri, can you hear us?
He's on mute.
Yeah, he's muted, but I'm not sure. Maybe he's having a hard time coming in as well. Well, to begin with, Dr. Chongo, and maybe we'll just start with you. I know you're not in mental health or anything like that, but I know that you have a wealth of experience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, raising your children.
Wow, that's mouthful. I don't even know where to begin. Yeah, my name is Chongo. I come from Zambia, and my late wife and I have 5 children, all gone, but we have an interesting family. We have the 60s and then the 40s, late 30s, and then the late 20s. And it has been an interesting experience altogether. Actually, all of it very good in my opinion. I came here initially for studies, and I stayed because of my children for their studies. And it seems that we are now stuck.
Mm.
Really, I believe that I was an expert before I started. I was an expert in parenting until I got children.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because children come with no instructions. We read and child guidance and Adventist Home and several other books. But when we started having our children, then I knew we needed to be on our knees. So we prayed a lot. And the things that we did well, I think we imparted in our children the love for the Lord Jesus and everything that he has done for us and for them. I cannot emphasize that more because I am guided by particularly 2 scriptures. The first one is the one that we are very familiar with, Deuteronomy 6:7, where the Lord says that you have to teach your children coming in, sitting in, going out, and still coming back in. I believe that is very, very crucial to especially our families these days. And so we made it a point that we had prayers. In fact, when it struck 9, everybody knew it was time to pray and thank the Lord for what he had done for us that day. And I think that helped cement some of the things that could have been difficult. And then the other thing is really, I am as guilty as everybody else. I am, I think, a stickler and probably very inflexible in a lot of stuff because I expected and I still expect excellence from my children, because to me the sky is not the limit. If they're aiming for the sky, they're not aiming high enough. And so that brought in a lot of issues, as I'm going to say in a moment, and then let somebody else take over from there. As a result, I think they have done very well for themselves. We have a school counselor who is doing very, very well. We have a nurse anesthetist who is doing very, very well. We have a first sergeant in the Marine Corps, actually second in command in one of the battalions in Connecticut, doing very well as a corporate security agent for Chesapeake Energy. We have a very bright and upcoming musician. If you're an agent or you know an agent, I'm pitching for him. And then we have a nurse doing APRN right now, studying for that. 3, the ladies are married, and I really appreciate that for what God has done for us. The young men are still thinking. I think those things, I think we did well. I think I should give credit to my wife because I traveled a lot, and I'm coming now to what I did. Probably that if I could do it again, I would do it differently. I have been a busy person. Busy from the very beginning to even now as we speak. But my wife was there and shepherded the process, and we cried together and did all kinds of things. But one thing that I really regret in everything that we have done is that we didn't stick to teaching our children our mother tongue. I really regret that because I think if you lose a language, you lose a lot. And coming here, we're trying to enmesh them in this culture so that they could do well. We deliberately decided English was going to be spoken in our place, so that what they had at home is what they had at schools, what they had at play. And as a result, even those who are born in Zambia, the three older ones, now they can't even. Chongo, I think, can understand a few words, but that's it. Everybody else does not speak that language. I think that has been, to me, the greatest disappointment in there. The other thing also, I'm sure that we could debate this, is that I think, in my opinion, I am the only one who is no longer at ease. Let me explain that. Because my feet are in two places. They're in Zambia and they're in the United States. Sometimes, when I'm thinking like Zambian, and forgetting that I'm talking to people who probably will never go to Zambia, have no affinity or any proclivity with anything that has to do with Zambia. But I try to say that, at least for me, I say, you can take me out of Zambia, but you cannot take the Zambia out of me. And so there are certain things that I gravitate towards, and then they begin to say, what are you talking about? And then we go into some what I call teachable moments. Two things, and I'll end here, and I think wait for some questions later. One of these days, I want to write a book entitled "The Questions That My Children Have Ever Asked Me." Actually, just a few years ago, that our second born asked me a question: "Dad, are you ever wrong?" I haven't answered that question, but I have reflected on it. I think the understanding is that I projected this. You cannot be wrong. You cannot a perfect kind of image, even if things were not perfect. Being strong when you should be vulnerable, because really you should be more than vulnerable. So that question, I've been trying to think about it, but I think one thing that related to that question that I have been reflecting on lately is the statement that I used to make, because in our home there were expectations. Like I said, we had prayer every day. We taught the best way we could. And then there was a statement that especially the youngest boy reminded me of one day. And the statement was, don't ask a question for which you know the answer already. But what that statement did really was to put a barrier between me and my children, so that I think if they had some specific question that troubled them and they knew what I was going to say, they didn't come to me. And that came full circle to me when our son really, I know this is being broadcasted, he was depressed to the point of where he wanted to take his life. And he couldn't come to me first. We had to hear through the school counselor and things like that. And so I have been struggling with, this aspect of how do you really be vulnerable I'm becoming more vulnerable these days than I used to be. But they are grown, they're all now adults, and they are having their own lives. And I wonder, did I miss something? I think I'll end there and let some others say something.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for the vulnerability as well. Parenting can be something very difficult. I would like to go now, before I go to Sister Angela, I'll go to Pastor Edwards. Pastor Edwards, I'm also tapping into your own personal and as well as just your expertise. Tell us a little bit about yourself, bringing up two beautiful daughters, challenges, things that worked well, and I don't know. I mean, you're a pastor, so I wonder sometimes as a pastor, the strictness that goes in a home. People say pastors are very strict, and and if it's true, and how does that affect, the parenting and all those kind of things? Go, tell us a little bit about yourself and that.
Yes, first of all, indeed, it's a privilege to be here with you, and I appreciate Dr. Chango sharing, as you said, being vulnerable. And I think that that's one of the things that, as a parent, I had to catch on to quick, because unlike most who are on this line, I actually was involved in youth ministry for quite a number of years. And I had to make a decision early on that my children would not have any higher expectation on them than the children that I'm pastoring. So we never said to our children, don't do this because I'm the pastor. Don't embarrass me. Don't make me ashamed of you. Because my children were children just like everybody else's child. And so we never put that extra weight on them, just like I never put extra weight on my wife as a pastor's wife. She was always an individual who could make her own decisions. So we did the same thing with our children, even as it related to some of the standards that people held high, let's say jewelry. So our philosophy on jewelry was that we didn't believe in wearing it, but more of a standard than a sin. But after a certain age, when they wanted to experiment, the only thing we said was, don't pierce your ears. We didn't think you needed to put a hole anywhere God didn't place it. But what we did say was this: you attend church school. The rule for church school is you cannot wear jewelry. So we're not here to change that rule or argue about it or fight it. I said, if you go work for UPS and they tell you to wear brown, you can't go up in there saying, well, yeah, but I want to wear purple. You'll get fired from your job. I said, fine, you can wear purple, but not at this company. So we tried to teach them the principle of understanding that there are guidelines and regulations in life, and not everything has to be a scripture. It doesn't have to be because it's a sin. It's because that's the standard. That's what is expected. In the meantime, we taught our kids to trust our word. I remember my daughter was young, and Dr. Chango, just like you talking about being busy, I had 3 churches. And so I remember telling my daughter that when I got home from this particular church that I would take her out to get some ice cream. Well, you have to understand that when I went to that church, it was on a Monday night. And since I had 3 churches, prayer meeting was the consistent time they would see me. I had one on Monday, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday. So this group, of course, want to talk after church. Well, I ended up getting home late, and by the time I got home, my daughter was asleep. I walked in the door, and my wife told me, said, yeah, she was waiting on you. I said, really? She said, yeah. So I went into the bedroom. I woke her up. And I said to her, hey, remember Dad told you when you get home, I'm going to take you to go get some ice cream. Well, this was in Mississippi. There's nothing open at night. So I had to get in my car, drive back up the highway from where I came, and go to a side store on a dark road. She had her feet pajamas on. She got out the car, walked into the store. She stood before the ice cream bar. They had those boxes where you slide the door open and you look in. And so then I slid it open. I said, okay, get you one. She got that one. We went to the counter. We paid for it. Put it in the car. She had that ice cream cone. We got in the car, and I could see that look on her face. I said, you can eat it. So I took off to drive, and there's this one spot where there's a train track. And I hit that train track, but I looked back to see where she was. And lo and behold, she was asleep holding the ice cream. Now, she didn't even really get to eat it, okay? By the time we got home, we threw it away. But she always remembered Dad keeps his word. And that's what that was about. So we made sure that that was something that our children understood. If I say something, it is going to be done. Whether it's, if I told you I was going to punish you, it's going to be done. So we tried to make sure that that was something we live by, our word. If we say we're going to do it, then we do it. Well, later on in life, my oldest daughter made a decision in life that changed her life forever. She ended up getting arrested, and she ended up facing 10 to 99 years in state prison in Texas for transporting drugs, having a loaded Glock 45, and crossing state lines, over $400,000 worth of drugs. So when that happened, of course, everybody found out about it. Were we embarrassed? No, we weren't. That was a decision she made, and I wish she had made it. So I wasn't ashamed and afraid for the church to know. To the contrary, the church prayed for her. And I asked for permission to share it. She gave me permission to share it. And how do we treat her? Well, when she got home out of jail, she came home. She didn't know this, but she had enough time to go take a shower, change clothes, eat food, and then we put her out for 6 months. She no longer lived with us. However, talking about a father, we did make arrangement for a place for her to live. So she ended up staying with someone. We paid that person every month. We took away her key. We changed our house code. She could not come to our house without permission because though I'm her parent, I understood that if she doesn't take this thing seriously, it's going to change her life forever. Secondly, I had a second child that we were trying to raise. And my daughter's attitude at that time was, this was a badge of honor. I went to jail. I was in prison with murderers and, and all of this. And so we recognized that we needed to, yes, love, but also discipline. We did not reject her. And we went through a process, and I'll never forget the attorney told me basically they expect her to be back in jail within 6 months. She ended up on a 10-year probation. She never violated in 10 years because she lived with us. And I told her the day that she ever comes in past curfew, it would be the day she would never live with us again because I would never be more worried about her life than she was. So she survived that. So after that, we encountered her. She became pregnant. So she was pregnant with my grandbaby. I didn't know. So she came to tell me, and I'll never forget the day she told me. Where I'm sitting right now is where we had our conversation, at the island in our kitchen. And she came in, but she stood at the end of the island. And so she's like, I got something to tell you. Well, I didn't even notice, but my front door was open. So she came in with the front door open, and I found out later on, the car running and the car door open. Because in her mind, Daddy is going to kill her. So she told me she was pregnant. And you want to know what ran through my mind? Everybody else's child that was pregnant that I ministered to. So I looked at her. She told me. I took several deep breaths. And I told her. I held her. She cried. I cried. I told her we're
Wow.
going to get through this. But I did share something else with her. It's not over. Because I might have outbursts every now and then where I'm upset. And you know what? And we talk. I said, but understand, Daddy forgives you. But what can I do after she gets pregnant? Why would I reject her? Why would I say you're no longer my child or I'll have nothing to do with you? Well, see, she hit a nerve. She had the nerve to tell me it's a male child. Oh my God. I have nothing but girls. Here I am going to have a male child. And so we went through our thing, but I made sure that I gave her support. So my thing as it relates to parental disappointment, I am not the first father who had a child that disappointed them. The first father who had a child that disappointed them was the Creator. And look at the action he took. Revelation puts it this way. It lets us know that he was the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So before the child disappointed him, he already made an appointment. It doesn't mean he doesn't discipline because he did. He put an angel at the gate with a sword, say, you come on up in here, I'll cut you up. He turned around and cast them out of that. He stripped them of their covering. He placed upon them a punishment that we're still experiencing to this day. And so it's not that you, in your disappointment, totally reject them, but there's a balance. They are always your child, but yet they may have to suffer consequences. So I never told anybody I was disappointed in my daughters, no matter what they did. You know, I was disappointed in their behavior, but not in them. You know, and then I look at my own life. It ain't like I didn't do nothing. Okay. So I couldn't pretend as though I was this virtuous person that never disappointed or took the wrong turn. I could testify that if it wasn't for the mercies of God,
Amen.
there would I be. And so
Amen.
any parent that's facing disappointment, yes, disappointment in their behavior, but never fail in making an appointment to remain their parent.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor. Wow, that is just so powerful. I've had two very good testimonies today. You know, I could just wrap it up right now. So thank you so much for those testimonies. And I'm sure people have questions to ask. And I have my own questions. I was writing down my little notes just to ask, you know, on everything from the two speakers so far. Pastor Zemiri, can you hear us now? Pastor Zemiri, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Wonderful.
Yes, I can
just
hear
wanted
you.
to
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you. There's a little bit of delayed response. I think it's just an internet connection problem, but we can hear you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to speak on finding yourself in disappointments. Tell us a little bit about that. What does that mean? And just, you know, also tell us a little bit about your own experience with children, raising children, and, you know, and the ministry that you do.
Ooh.
Well, I thank you so much. My apologies. I'm not sure what was happening with my connection. Well, I want to piggyback on what Pastor Edwards just said. That he wasn't disappointed in them, but in their behavior. But here is what happens when a child knows it is possible that the parent is disappointed in behavior. It has a direct impact on the child. The child feels they have let down the parent. And I think, and I'm not contradicting Pastor Edwards, but I think what happened in my own experience, I remember in 1970, in my 5th grade, my father is a pastor, retired pastor. In my 5th grade, I brought my grade report home. And out of 25 students, I was number 24, position 24. And my mother looked at that grade book, and she looked at me and she said, "What do you think your father is going to do?" I knew my father wouldn't beat me because he loved me. But what I felt right there, I felt like my heart was dropping into my intestines. Feeling I let down this minister who possibly was looking at me for success. Now, having said that, I will speak to the definition of disappointment. I think this is the response of the parents, including the children. The response is emotional, is psychological, simply because the parent has lost the unfulfilled expectations. There are things we expect our children to become. So you are asking me a question, how do we deal if we think the unfulfilled expectations do exist? What I learned from my parents and what I have learned from myself, probably I can share this with you. There are times, as I came into this country in diaspora, I expected my children to be very educated. Why? They are my social security. This is why we all strive to educate our children at even our cost. We plan for retirement simply because we are trying to invest into the success of our children. But then my expectations of the child don't match their expectations. That's where the problem lies. Am I making sense right there? The expectations of a diasporian parent generally does not match expectations of the child. We want them to be highly educated because we believe in education. It is the only avenue or the gateway to continued gainful employment. And with that, once the two expectations contradict, we do have a problem. So what's the suggestion right there? I think the first thing that a diasporian parent has to do is ask oneself, as a way of assessing oneself, are the expectations I have, do they match the expectations of my child? That's very critical, number one. Number two, you got to find, assuming the expectations are purely yours, not with the child, you got then to find out where your expectations are coming from. And I'm not sure what constitutes our group right now. One thing I want to pinpoint that I've seen among Seventh-day Adventists, they are highly competitive in their lives. Their children get educated. What happens then if your child does not get educated to the level you are expecting? So once you understand that probably your expectations are stemming from your faith, you want to begin to ask yourself a question. Are those expectations sustainable? Why is this important? Probably this is the time you may want to revert to go to speak with the child. Now, there is a term I like when there is a parent and child relationship. There is what we call the idea of interview. The term interview, inter means it's bridging between two places. Then view is the person. This is where I think a diasporan parent needs to sit down with. I done that, I don't. Why? My culture generally has been coming from either the authoritarian parenting mode or the disciplinarian mode of parenting. That's me as a diasporian. I don't know if there are any questions right there.
Yes, I would like to just remind the audience, especially those of you who are in this air meet, there's a place that says questions. You can put your questions in there, and then we will look at the questions and we will let everybody know what you're asking. So just look at where the questions are and text your question, and we'll tell the panelists. Thank you. That is so powerful, Pastor. That is so powerful. I hope we can hear some more of that. We're going to have to come back to that. I would like Sister Angela to just give a brief about herself, what she does, in Sacramento, and the work she does with children. Or I know you work in that department, if I'm not mistaken. And, just any information you can share with individuals about, some of the concerns that have been raised already, or talked about already, and just your experience, your own experience.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to this platform. Are we getting the feedback on me?
No, you're okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. So again, I'm Angela Fusilier, and I have been ministering to the community of Sacramento for the last 20 years, both in the church and in the secular system, working with Child Protective Services, the child welfare system. And it's been a challenge, it's been a rewarding experience. I work in the area of families and children when they have more or less hit their bottom. So I see a lot of trauma, dealing with a lot of seeking to recover and restore families. We've heard from our panelists so far wonderful, strong presentations on proper, appropriate, balanced fatherhood, parenting, and it's been a blessing. But we understand that's not the fullness of our society. So many people don't understand basic concepts of nurturing and supporting their children who have come into the world without request. They've come into the world without a plan. They didn't ask to be here, and they don't owe parents anything. They are to be nurtured and guided and directed on becoming a healthy, whole human being. And so many parents, as I've seen over the years, don't have the tools for various reasons to nurture and support their children. And it's just a devastation. And that's in the African diaspora as well as in the American society overall. And yes, I see children from all walks of life, from all cultures. Here in Sacramento area, it's a huge Asian community. Within my church body specifically, we are very diverse in the Sacramento. This is the capital city of California. So very diverse, and we have a huge African representation in our church body. So it's been a blessing to be able to see the support that families give one another and see the village at work. But specifically, I see so much trauma in my work, and just wanting to make sure that there are tools and resources available for the families and how to utilize those tools and move to the next stage of experiencing the fullness of life. And even understanding that in my secular role, God is still there. He's there even more because we understand where sin abounds, grace is much more abounding. And so he's there and having the blessing to be a light in those dark places for families that have not exercised balance with their children, have given them everything, and now they have a spoiled, undisciplined child, or have not given them the things that they need, and they have a hurt, broken child. So it's been a wonderful experience that I continue daily to engage in, up to and including my current experience in the secular system. I am currently on a mental health leave, the first mental health leave I've had in 20 years, because a youth attacked me physically. A 17-year-old youth attacked me, and it was just horrendous. But we understand, we signed up to work with troubled kids and families, but for it to have actually happened, it's been devastating, totally disillusioning for me. But I can't take away from the fact that this broken person wanted someone else to be broken as they are, not having the tools to navigate life well. And, we talk about the mental health issues of our population. And, the mental health fragility, it starts in the family system. I was just so delighted hearing the various sharing so far, especially from fathers who understand the balance of listening to their children, affirming their children. These are basic small things that mean so much in the life of developing a human being and avoiding the mental health trauma and drama that I experience. And we see it in the church as well. We see so much brokenness in the church. And I would say 99.99% of it starts in the home. Yeah. So.
Wow, that is very interesting. And some people right now would ask, like, well, how does that affect us? We're talking about children who are completely, maybe broken or coming from families that are neglectful. How does that affect us? But I think we will we'll find out how does that affect us, because yes, you may not be at that point, but anything can lead to that. There's many things that can lead to that. So I'm happy that Sister Angela is one of us today and that we are having this discussion. I just want to go back to, Pastor Roberts and Dr. Mundende, first of all. I mean, you brought up issues of family, that were kind of like personal in terms of, your own children and what you went through, and it's interesting because there are two different aspects. Dr. Mundende has to do with mental health, having to deal with a child with mental health. And then Pastor Edwards has to deal with a child who was just, defiant, and doing her thing and having to deal with that. Now, both of you being individuals that are very well known in your circles and respected, it's something that Pastor Edwards said that was very interesting about the fact that, despite what your daughter had done, and you being a pastor that all of us love and know, so whatever happens might be very public and everyone is talking about it or something. How do you manage that balance? Just being able to, Dr. Mundende, being able to deal with your son having mental health and being able to talk about it and not allow it to kind of take away from you or the stigma of having to deal with that with your son. I'll start with Dr. Mundende.
I think when something has happened, there are two ways you can go. One is to deny it, and the other one is to embrace it. And the two are not necessarily bad. But the issue here is that when we came to learn about that was the time. I mean, mental health was not a topic out there. We nowadays we're very comfortable with the word mental health, and we can talk about it openly. There, it was not that common, and when you hear for the first time that you could have lost a child if things had gone the way that child wanted, and you had no clue of what that child was going through. First of all, you become you become, how did I feel? I felt not betrayed, but I felt like the world had started to close on me, because seriously, my wife and I did not know that our child was that depressed, and so the first thing you want to do then is, what can I do to bring him or her out of that state? Because things have happened. So there's nothing you can do other than embrace the point and try to reach out to him. And actually, he resisted for some time. Told us, give me some time, give me some distance. And he was coming from my house, give me some distance. And we had to work through that, and then started to just look for resources that could help him. And I think he did most of the things, because he had already reached out to the school counselor, and we just cooperated with what they were trying to do to help him. And I can report today that I'm so glad that he's doing so well. It's like, he never even went through that. But once the thing has happened, the only thing you can say is that, what would Jesus do? What would God do? And the question that came to my mind is that God deals with that every day for all the billions of people on this earth. My son was not the first. My son was not going to be the last. And so it's just a matter of embracing him and telling him that we loved him, and whatever was happening in his life, we needed to know. I was disappointed I was the last one to know. I would have loved to be the first one to know, but I was the last one. And actually, it was because, this HIPAA thing and privacy, and we didn't even hear directly. And you really, I don't want to blame the system. It's just that I think, in my opinion, what we lose when we come here in the diaspora, and I can just talk about my family, because some people have got brothers and sisters and uncles and people like that in this United States. My family is the only one here, and what you lose, in my case, is that there's nobody that my child can go to. There's no grandma, there is no uncle, there is no aunt that they can actually go to and at least spill some. The siblings are not going to snitch on their brother, their sister. And so what you miss is the extended family system that we have in Zambia and Africa in general. That actually the grandma becomes the shield, and then they begin to tell you, and they just do things differently. So I didn't have that, and so being the last to know really was devastating to me in a way. But once you know things have happened, you have to go into now a mode where you have to deal with the crisis, because it was a crisis.
Okay, thank you. Pastor.
Yes. So as it relates to the avoidance of the pressure from the church, I do want you to know that there was talk. Matter of fact, my daughter sat in church one day, not at my church, but at another church, and heard people talk. But it didn't faze her. The reason why it didn't faze her because she knew how we felt and where we were. And I was surprised. I was proud of her that she didn't turn around and say something. But no one ever approached me and said, that's a shame, your daughter. I think they know that would not have been wise. Because I talk about my family. I talk about my children. I was a stay-at-home father up until my kids were 4.5, almost 5 years old. They never went, they didn't have a babysitter. They had their father. And I was pastoring, but let's say I had an appointment. I needed to go visit someone. If they weren't sick, I just took my child with me. That's it. I took the baby seat and went there and visited. And then when they got older and I visited, I taught them how to pray for people. So I would be like, Ivana, will you pray for Sister So-and-so? And she'd bow her head, and bless and bless her. Next thing I know, that member crying. And guess what? It was my enemy. So we had this relationship as a father, being close to them because I grew up without my father. And so when it happened, I was reading one definition of why parents might feel disappointed is because our children, and Pastor Zamiri put it this way, but I'm just using another term. We have invested in them. They are an investment. And if I were to put money in the stock market and it falls, I'm disappointed. And it's the same premise. You feel that after all I've done for you, but as Sister Angela said, they don't owe us anything. They didn't ask to be here, right? My mother told me one time when I said, I sassed off at her and said, I didn't ask to be born. She said, yeah, but the way you're talking, you're asking to die. Okay. So from the standpoint of the pressure of church, I started my ministry off as a new Adventist at age 19. So I had a religious background before I came in, Baptist. I'd been in the military. So I was self-reliant. I was in the Marines. So what happened is I had an independence that I had growing up without my father. So when I joined the church and I saw pastors, one pastor who took his car back because the conference talked about the kind of car he bought. He bought a Mercedes. And they talked about it and he took it back. Well, here I am. I wasn't even picked up as a regular pastor. I was on this special project where I had to go start a church. I bought a Mercedes. I drove my Mercedes to the president's house because you don't determine whether or not I'm going to drive. I kept my kids, but the president used to talk about mothers not working. Yeah, but that ain't what my wife decided to do. But one of us was there with our children. Now, of course, when she came home from work, I made sure I threw the children in her arm and I left, even if I ain't have nothing to do. All right. But so we both parented, but I realized that my private life is not governed by the organization. And that's what helped me, is that, yes, when it comes to my family, this is my family. They are not paying. If they start paying my children's salary and my wife's salary, then tell them what to do.
Can I interject right there, Pastor Edwards?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
He has a little bit of a delay. He's coming in.
Pastor Edwards, you really bring a very powerful point. Now, I think point right there. I think the difference here, the church has something to do with Africans who are from Africa. The church is a village. The church does discipline whoever's kid is in the church. Now, what has happened is this. Because, and this is the power of autonomy, the culture that you grew up in, rather than the African culture of communalism. Because we know can on your child. When an African child fails, they are not evaluated on the terms of what I would call the unit family as defined in America. We use the family as a church. We begin to talk, giving an example of my relative, Dr. Colin. I would say, well, my son, you are not coming to church. Look at Dr. Colin's son. He's the one who sang today. We begin to use communal standards. And I think that's where you find some of the dissonance, or one of the reasons why the diasporian parents seem to disconnect with children. You are using the culture which is communal versus using the standards you could have in your own home. When you use communal standards, there is that pressure you get, which may disable a parent to listen to their own child. Quick example, if I didn't explain this very well. Find mothers, like Dr. Mndende said, it's harder for them to tell somebody that my son smokes, my son drinks, my son is on drugs. Why? It's the fear of that generalized label, which is the village label. I just wanted to throw in that point right there. And I could be wrong. This is more from observation, but you bring it right there.
So let me say this. So I do have some Africa in me growing up. In my community, it was church and community that disciplined you. So if I acted up, the neighbor could tan my hide.
Okay.
And then they would tell mama, and mama got a piece too. All right. So we were in the diaspora, just in a different continent, because this was the way it was at church. So what helped me growing up, more so than not wanting to disappoint my mother, you didn't want to disappoint your grandmother. You didn't want to disappoint that neighbor who was loving and kind to you. So we still had that sense of communal. But by the time you get to my generation and I'm raising my kids, that's when a switch came. I got out of that into a system where I became an Adventist, and it elevates your level, your education level, your standard of living level. So you entered into a different environment. I was not living around my community. I moved out of state. So there's not that family. So I'm not going to trust anybody just because they're black to say they can put their hands on my child. Because these are not familiar blacks. These are people who just feel I got that kind of authority, and I had to say, no, you don't. All right. But growing up, oh no, man, you did not want to disappoint the neighborhood. And
Wow.
definitely didn't want to disappoint at church, because somebody will grab that ear and, or pinch you. I got more pinches than a pin cushion. All right. So we did have that. We're away from that now because most of us don't live in community,
Mm.
unless you go to church. But then even with that, you're more skeptical
Sure.
with this thing of sexual abuse or just abuse, period. You're like, no, just tell me what my child did. I'll take care of it.
Mm.
So we were
Yeah.
doing, while you were coming here, we were going through. We were in our own diaspora within our own community. And I happen to be, from Memphis, Tennessee, in the hotbed where Martin Luther King passed away. And trust you me, that communal existence was important, because outside of that existed a world that did not like you. But inside that communal aspect, people cared. So they snitched on you or they disciplined you. There were no secrets. Okay. Somebody gonna tell, because this was a part of the community. But you're right. In yours, as I went to All Nations Church and existed, I saw it. However, the challenge I ran to in All Nations was that not all tribes functioned the same way. But
And
the dominant tribe wanted to impose
Hmm.
the way that they function onto everybody else.
Oh.
yeah, I like that you brought that point up, even talking about all nations and just understanding that when you talk about finding yourself in disappointment in the parenting of the African diaspora, it's a whole nother world that we're living in. And so the young people are finding themselves trying to find who they are at a whole different level in our global community with so many different values and traditions that are, the expectations of all of these different morals and standards of life and expectation. And, it's enough trying to find out who you are in your own city, state, country, village. But now we're, addressing life from a global perspective with the access of the internet, and we're in everybody else's business, but there's no accountability. And that's a huge problem because, we should be concerned about each other. But without that accountability piece and without the understanding of, basic moral standards lined up, we're just all over the place. And so parents would be disappointed with the outcome of some of their children's choices who are trying to figure out how to be in the world, but they're still in the home. And that's a huge conflict
Mhm.
that
It's very,
we're dealing with.
yeah, very interesting discussion. I'm just listening to everyone and I'm thinking about relevance. Like sometimes I think we stop being relevant, and because, we are living in this world, and our children, whether they came from Africa or maybe they were born here, they have to be relevant. They have to live in this world, and the things that are happening in this world, they have to, they deal with. And so we have to kind of come to that point where we have to kind of work through this situation and see where we can meet, because not everything that we did the way we did it in Africa is going to be done here, and our kids don't even understand that. Some of them never even grew up there. Now, I would also say, like Pastor Edwards has said, grew up in Mississippi, the whole thing was different, comes to California, completely different. There's no way he's going to think everything that was done in Mississippi is going to be the same for the kids here. It might be a little different, and so he has to adjust, Before I go further, I have a couple of questions that have come in. And I also want to remind everyone, if you're having problems with volume, please go to YouTube, our YouTube channel. I think I had put a link out there. There should be a YouTube channel where you can also listen in. The first question I have was posted on the chat, so I just moved it to the question section. It says, "What do you do as a parent of a well-behaved child who does not want to go to college and just wants to work?" And the other one, which is similar to that, and I think these were also posted during Dr. Zamiri, so you might have to answer this. What about God's specific expectations of our children, specifically regarding profession chosen? So there's always this issue in our community where we have parents sometimes picking what they think their children should be, and pushing them to do that. So if your parent thinks you should be a doctor, they're pushing you to become a doctor. Now somebody's also talking about a child who doesn't want to go to college. What should you do? They just want to work. What would you do with that, Dr. Zamiri?
I'm sorry I missed part of the part of where you're making some content. It was just breaking down.
Oh, okay.
Tell him to skip. Tell him to click on his screen.
I'm sorry, Dr. Nomsa.
Yeah. Tell him to click on his screen to open questions and he can see what they are.
Okay. I hope he's heard that. Okay. So in the meantime, okay.
Just repeat your question.
All right. The question says, what do you do as a parent of a well-behaved child who does not want to go to college and just wants to work? The other one is, what about God? Okay. Uh-oh. I guess Dr. Zamiri is having a hard time.
Yeah, he's having
yes. Okay. Well, I will throw the question to any one of the three that are here. What would you do as a parent? Yeah.
Okay. Let me do the second one real quick.
Okay.
In terms of God's specific expectation of our child, specifically regarding profession chosen, unless you were with the temple and they called you to be a Levite or a craftsman or whatever the case may be, there's nothing in the Bible or text that says thou shalt be a janitor, thou shalt be a teacher, thou shalt be a social worker, thou shalt be this. I think there are two things that we often try to make God out of, and that is that we are robots, that he directs to the point that you don't have a choice. In life, God allows us to choose. Now, in that text where it says, train up a child in the way it should go, and he will not depart from it, I learned very early to watch my children to get an idea of what bent they may have and to try to see if that might be it, or to expose them to different things so that at least they have stuff to look at. Because ultimately, they will be like this guy who turned around and insisted that his son, be a doctor. His son turned around and went and became a doctor. He marched across the stage, walked there to his parent and says, here's your degree. Now I'll get mine. So I think it's a listening and observing process, but it's also recognizing children can make choices. See, my biggest thing was, sure, I would love for all my kids to be doctors. But one thing I did demand, you need to work. You need a job, okay? But I could not designate or pinpoint, you're going to be a mechanic, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. But I did instill in them the ethics of work. And I think that that's what God instills when he tells the story of the ant. You can't benefit if you don't work. Okay. So I'm trying to keep them from relying on a handout, but understand you got to find something to do and I hope it's something that you are passionate about.
Elder Mundende, you were about to say something too?
Yeah, I think the pastor took the thunder, but this is the point.
I took the thunder.
Yeah, I am an educator. I am an educator, and I believe in education.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me qualify that. My father used to tell me, and I believe he was a prophet. My father used to tell me that he had 3 PhDs. He never went to school, but he told me he had 3 PhDs. He said PhDs will put clothes on your back, food on your table, roof over your top, and anything else you want. And he says, I provide that to you. But I don't want a 61-year-old man in my house. Then he said, in my time, a paper was not needed. In your time, a paper will be needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so do whatever you have to do to get that paper, because that paper is going to do those 3 PhD things I'm talking to you about. Now, let me come to the question. The problem, I think, particularly, I'm just going to include my generation, first generation in the diaspora. We are very ambitious. We came here with the aim of, most of us, not to work, but to have an education. And somehow we expect our children to have the same kind of education, or at least aim that far. The point is that, in my opinion, and I'm at a college, in my opinion, this is what I believe, that whatever passion you have, I try to persuade my children to be teachers. They say, no, there's no money in teaching. So that was not even a discussion. I say, you can be a professor. They say, yeah, you are a poor professor. So that was not even a discussion. But the thing is that in this world, in this country, even in the Garden of Eden, when sin entered, God said you have to work in order to eat.
Gotta work.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to, yes, if you think that you can go just buy, some miraculous just go buy and without investing, I think the pastor said that, investing your time in something worthwhile that nobody can take away from you, then be it. But in this world in which we're living, somebody can take my job today and I'll find another position tomorrow. Why? Because I have the papers and I choose what to do. Not everybody, I used to quarrel with a lot of people, even with myself. Probably not everybody needs a master's or a PhD. Probably not even a bachelor's, but you need a vocation, you need something to fall back on. This idea of I don't want to go to college or technical place or community college is, I don't believe in it.
What do you do though? So what do you do, Elder, if you get a child who's saying, I don't want to go to college right now, I want to work? What will you do? I mean, at that point, I mean, the philosophy is good, but how do you help this child so that he can continue?
The pastor said there's a choice, and you live with consequences of that choice. So you don't want to go to school, fine. You want to work where somebody has given you a job, fine. But I hope that it's a job that you are doing some apprenticeship of some kind.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, when you sit down one day, you'll be saying, I have been in this job and I can't move and I'm in a dead end. You have to do something. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
That's your choice. That's your choice. And like my father said, you are not going to be in my house if you can't work.
Okay, so thank you so much. I'm going to ask Sister Angela another question here. There's a question from Savannah A's Children Ministry, I guess. It says, in your work of life, what is the primary reasons you've seen between the disconnection between a child and a parent?
That is such a great question. I think the primary would be the lack of communication, that they're talking two different languages. It's the parent's job, as Pastor Edwards talked about early on, to study that
Just a
child,
minute, baby.
who once again did not ask to come here. And so it's that parent's job to study the child, to understand who that individual is and who God is desiring to bring forth out of that being. And so life goes awry very quickly when a child is not being heard, when a child is not being listened to, and just building on the disconnect from early on. You talk about the terrible twos, or even prior to that, not understanding the different tones of a baby's cry. That this cry means I just need your attention, this cry means I'm hungry. And the parent haven't taken the appropriate interest or understanding on how this child is communicating, and then affirming that child. So that is the foundational issue that happens with the disconnect, that I would just communicate, and just building on that, the misfiring of communicating with your child. But even in the best circumstances, so you communicated effectively with your child all their life, it's still an individual, and respecting the individual life, that they get to make choices. And I love that, as one of the panelists shared, that you choose how you want to live your life. That's your choice. I'm going to support you 100% as far as I can. But when you make those choices that take you off of the path of life, wellness, and health, I can't go there with you. But, whenever that child desires or needs to turn around, as we see in the example of the prodigal son, God is there. The parent needs to choose to be there. And, that's my input on from that perspective. But just knowing that you are committed to nurture and help to develop that young person to make solid choices, and be confident that even when they make choices that you don't agree with, that you put into that child enough goodness, enough solid understanding, reason to turn around. And if and when that doesn't happen, as a Christian person, we still have to have faith that that child is in God's hands, and not feel as though, and I see it many, many times with parents, that it's something more that they could have done. And while that may be true, it's still an individual, and you have to give room for that.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we have is society keeps changing. As Dr. Chango said, you need paper. But the problem that we have is the areas where our children really strived, particularly in my day and age, all of a sudden, those areas aren't being offered anymore. Electronics, carpentry, plumbing, all of these things that used to have an apprenticeship program. So you didn't have to go to a 4-year school and then start practicing. You worked that thing from day one and began to do it, and you ended up becoming a master plumber or a master electrician or a master carpenter. So we come up, even with our own school, Oakwood, which had vocational education to become a liberal arts school. Well, we've forgotten the rest of the community if that's all we're offering. Okay? So the other day, I'm on Oakwood's board, and one of the things I mentioned to them was about starting an EMT and EMS classes. I said, because that's the wave of today. emergency medicine. These paramedics who are able to either be with the fire department or with the a company. But when all we're offering is liberal arts, unless you're going to be a doctor, and you can be a doctor and a nurse, but below that, I think we're missing a golden opportunity to afford our kids an education that they can learn by doing it and studying versus study, and then I hope you get to do it. So I think we're going to have to reshape our organizational platform. So because, like we said, in this environment, you almost don't have anything to push but college. Because we don't have those other opportunities. If you do, you got to go to this school that's going to put you in debt for 9,000 years, to do it. And because they charge so much money. But so we're going to have to recognize alternate education. I have a daughter who is trying to start her own business. If she ever concentrates and does it, we've already seen she can be successful.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So now, Edwards, right there on the dancing. I mean, so you being an Adventist pastor and knowing that, there's always this kind of, how can I put it? Maybe let me put it this way, because I know last week we had a discussion, and one of the things that came up from the young people was the parents' expectations. And part of it was that sometimes they had unrealistic expectations, like Dr. Zemiri had just put it earlier. They have unrealistic expectations, which I would say maybe incongruence with, children. I mean, parents have, they want their children to do certain things, and certain things are not acceptable. Like the way you're saying, okay, the plumbing. I think right now, if you suggested to a parent, especially in the diaspora, that their child should be a plumber, they would fall over and die. So how do you help parents who have that thing whereby they have a hard time? It's about how they look on the outside. It's not about what's going on in the inside, and it's tearing their family apart because the child is trying to do what they can, but because the parents are kind of very unrealistic about the whole matter, it's causing a lot of conflict in the home, and they feel the child is the one that's, kind of, probably not just listening. They should listen more, understand what their parents are saying. We are older, we are wiser. A child should be seen, not heard, and so it's causing a lot of conflict in the home. How can we help those parents that have to come to, kind of like grasp or reality of the fact that it's okay for children to be whom God has put them to be? If they have to be a nanny, they're going to be the best nanny they can be. If they're going to be a plumber, they're going to be the best plumber there ever was. I mean, what would you say to that?
So there are two things I would say to that. Sometimes the diaspora group is very difficult to change because it's what the Bible says, teaching for commandments, the traditions of men. So those traditions have been elevated to commandments. Like, for instance, I encountered once one of my members from a diaspora country was upset because their daughter had a baby, got pregnant. And that person decided they were going to disown her, literally. They weren't going to have nothing to do with the baby or anything. So, of course, I was informed about it. So I pulled him aside and had a man-to-man talk. I already experienced it, so I'm not speaking theoretical. I'm talking now, one man to another, having experienced it. I said to him, so your children did something that you could never forgive her for? I said, has God ever treated you that way? I said, now, one of the things I'm going to say to you, why would you penalize a child? What did the child have to do with it? So you're going to reject your grandchild, plus you're going to reject your daughter. And I talked to him and I said, and here you are, a leader in the church, preaching the gospel, having mercy on everybody else's child for what they do. But because you're embarrassed, you can't have it on your own. I said, then you just set a bad example for the rest of your members. And I began to share some things with them. We prayed and carried on. So she had the baby. And of course, he still was there. Man, he held that baby one time. Man, he was ready to take that baby. All right. That baby is like his child, just like my grandson, as you all know, anybody that knows me, that was my child. Okay. So sometimes it takes a personal conversation where here's what I tell people. If you talk to me or I talk to you, God ordained, then God can speak to me in my sleep. God can talk to me in my dreams, in my quietness, and I just opened the door by putting it there, but God can bust that door wide open. And if I say I'm a follower of Christ and I don't listen to his voice, then shame on me. So I think you run intervention as best as you can, but more so in a private, personal setting, more so than a public, you know. And some can be public dialogue like you're doing now. Hopefully there's some father or mother who's sitting there wrestling with their kids, and there's something that we say that God can take and put a stick pin on. And when I say a stick pin, that pin hurts. It's not being stuck to a board. It's being stuck to a heart, and it's uncomfortable. And then hopefully they will respond to it. So, and I can tell you, many people from diaspora countries have changed now. It don't take but one child. And that child, I remember I had two daughters. I thought I understood parenting. So my first daughter came along, and she fit that mold. She made us want another child. That second child came along, and I'll never forget, we took the practices of the first child and went to do them on the second child. We used to, because I believed in putting kids in swaddling clothing. That's what the Bible did with Jesus. I studied it. It found out that it brings a comfort to them, a relief, whatever. So the second child came, and man, you swallow that child was fighting. She was just fighting. If the first child started crying and unrest, we could take her arms and put it on her chest and hold it, and she whined down. Wah, wah, wah. Second child, we went to do it. That girl fought. She was like, I'm not going to be done like that. So finally one day, she was crying, and I went to go do that to her, to go put those arms together. That girl threw her arms out and her legs. And I realized that's not going to work with her. So we have to come to recognize our children are individuals. Mm-hmm. And they're not of the same mold. Okay. And so they're going to make different decisions. Yes, influence your children's decision. That's our responsibility. But in the end, they're going to make a choice. And if they make a choice, here's what I say. It's not landing them in jail and it's not landing them in hell, then I can support it. So I think ultimately you have to recognize that it may not be what I wanted you to do, but if you're working and you're aiming towards something, I want a relationship where I can say, let's see how we can make that go further so that you're not working for somebody. You can end up owning the business.
Yes.
I have a few more comments from YouTube here. Somebody said, if you have several children, others will go to college while others won't. Now, those who want will start having some inferiority issues and go into depression. So that's talking in terms of, I know some kids where, some kids in the family have done well and others have not, and causing some inferiority complexes. Maybe that could be, Sister Angela, you could talk to that. But let me just read one more. What if they don't want to go to college but become YouTubers? Okay. Nowadays, you can become a YouTuber star by creating foolishness but still become a millionaire. I think we already talked about that. They should get a degree first and then do YouTubing. Okay, so someone was just responding to that. All right, go, Sister Angela, go ahead and answer that, the other one.
Well, I want us to consider the reality, times are indeed changing. And even when we look at the the education aspect of our society and the way it was set up on acquiring this level of accomplishment to do certain roles and certain jobs that are no longer available, as we've already talked about, or industries are shifting. We really have to be flexible with that, and parents are going to benefit by reassessing their expectations and their values and allowing their children, their young adult children, to make those choices. Um, there are so many different occupations that are known and yet to be created, and to support a young person because of the effort that they put in, not the fact that they are. It's really important that we support their effort, not so much the outcome. So they may not be A or B students, but they're putting 100% in, and they are C students solid. Encourage and support that, because we see many A students that graduate and they live a life totally depressed. We see C and D students that finish school and they've created these businesses, they created these communities. They have high functioning lives, but they weren't the best students. And so understanding that as parents, we have to reassess. And again, I've said it already, honoring and acknowledging who this individual is. Who is this child? This is not Albert Einstein, okay? And that's all right. And the more positivity that we pour into children, the better that they get to express themselves and the better that they get to be. And if that is the janitor, like we said, that they're the best janitor that they can be, and that brings happiness and joy to their life. And having to remember that life is about being the best person that you can be, not living up to expectations of others. That brings so much oppression to the life of a human. And, taking courage as parents, making our own transitions of expectations. Um, I fostered a child. She had a great plan. She came to me at 15 years old. She had a marvelous plan. She wanted to get um, her nurse's aid. She was very specific. She wanted to get her nurse's aid certificate. She wanted to get an apartment in the projects and government housing, and she wanted to get a Plymouth car, some little poopy. But I affirmed this young lady. You have a marvelous plan. You got it all lined out. Let's look at this. And over the course of 3 years, her allowing my input, the young lady graduated from an HBCU at the top of her class as the student body president. She graduated magna cum laude, and she started her career job the day after graduation. But had I said to her, "Are you out of your mind? You want to be a nurse's aide when you could be a doctor, or you could?" No, she had a plan. She had motivation to do something, and that's what we nourished in her. Her efforts, and her efforts just continued to take her to the next level, one level after the next. She came to me. She was one of 7 children, and the 6 before her had all fell into the prison system. And we received her into our home, and she saw what was in front of her, and just getting that little bit of nurture took her whole life has changed. She's completely independent now and just enjoying her life. She's not in the projects. She's working on her physical therapy degree, and she's competent. She's self-satisfied, and she seeks the Lord.
But that's interesting you said that, because my wife came out of the foster care system, and she had a foster mother who was dying, and made an arrangement for her to get a better chance scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
So she went to a prep school, one of the top prep schools in the nation in Pennsylvania, where Johnny Weissmuller went and Senator something. Kids came to school in limos
All
with
right.
buses, right? But she went there, wasn't an A student, but she went to Oakwood afterwards. And at Oakwood, she was an A student. Matter of fact, she did Spanish. She had gone overseas in Spain for a year, learned the language, stepped into the Spanish class the first day and told the teacher, I want to take the exam,
Wow.
and made 90 something on it. And then clept Spanish too, made 100. But an opportunity was given, just some simple encouragement by another foster family, and she ended up getting a degree and me.
Yes, understanding what their dreams are. That's the goal. Understanding what their dreams and visions are and helping them to shape it according to how God is bringing them up. It can't be about us.
Yeah.
We were just a
Sister
portal.
Angela, Sister
So
Angela,
talk to me.
Sister Angela, you didn't hear what I said. I said she got a degree and
And
me.
you.
Yeah.
So now talk to me about as parents, our children, a lot of them, now I forgot the point I was going to make. I just lost my point. But anyway, to the point of Pastor Edwards, well, we're happy that she got you. She's a lucky woman, huh?
He's a lucky
That was
man. He's a lucky man.
Yeah. Okay, now I remember my point has come back. Woo! Yeah, I wanted you to talk to me about unconditional love. As parents, and our children coming to us, let's say, now let's talk about behavior, drug abuse, marijuana being something very common right now, wax, smoking wax, very common, defiance, like kids thinking they know it all, and we're still having a child now who's grown, who's no longer like under 18, and you're still a parent, because even if you are no longer like, telling them what to do or whatever, you are still in their life and you're still trying to help them, help them continue to grow. It's kind of like you're still mentoring in some ways. Talk to me about that balance, that fine balance, especially for the ones that have adult children. What is the fine balance between trying to get your children who are older, no longer like 18 and below, you're trying to help them continue to make good choices and kind of be in their life? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with, anyway, even disappointments when it comes to they're making decisions that you might not like, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I'd like to just say really briefly, one of the most beneficial tactics is to just ask questions, to ask adults questions, to make them think about their choices, because we don't ask questions a lot anymore for people to use their logical thinking. We accuse, we blame, we ridicule, but we just don't ask questions. And then with the question, putting boundaries in place, not willing to care for, or support or finance those activities, but just asking those questions. Are you getting what you need from life with this? What is the plan from this point forward? Let me understand what your plan is so I can see how I can help. One of my favorite things to
Uh-oh. Okay, Sister Angela just lost, on her favorite things. Anyone else talk to me about, that fine balance?
It's tough. I know a family that is going through that right now. They have just instituted tough love. They are giving, talking about directions. They say you have to do this, you have to seek counseling. You have to at least agree that you need to be counseled, and you need. They have put him through the hospital system, and then came out of that, and then they said you have to do. He wanted to come home. They said no. Right now, really, we cannot help you because we are not licensed to do this thing. So our first thing for you is to go to an institution that can help you, and when they take you to that place where they can release you to us, then we will be dealing with you. And in fact, the man has been in and out, and this time it has been 3 months that he has been home, and they say it seems to be working. So the tough love that they had for him was that you cannot continue doing. We love you, but right now you need professional help. And they have availed that professional help to him, and he's doing much better. And he is looking at the things now. He says, as he sees others, he says, was I doing those things? And they say, probably worse. And so he has come to a point where he says that the professional help helped him to a point where he does not want to go back. But we don't know what's going to happen. But that is happening right now. Professional help, and he is getting.
So how about talking about professional help in the diaspora? I don't know about African American community as well, but in the diaspora, issues of parents accepting outside help like counseling, for their children, because of fear of stigma and all those things. Would you talk to that about it, or Pastor Edwards, anything?
Yeah, that is a stigma that seems to be amongst Black people, from the diaspora to those who were born here, because they thought, I'm not crazy. They're associated with being crazy. But of course, as generations come along, it is a part of the fiber and fabric of society now. It's almost a badge. It's almost a conversation piece. Yeah, I go to my therapist, because most jobs have, give you the ability to go get therapy. But it's still not looked upon as something what I would call positive. You keep it quiet, you keep it private. But going back to that aspect of unconditional love, I go back again. Unconditional love does not mean no discipline. It doesn't mean no consequences. It means I love you despite you. The people who will end up lost will be loved by God unconditionally. I have a brother that, unfortunately, for most of his life, he has wrestled with drugs to the point where, to spare my parents' life, I had to intervene and take over and tell his father that his son could not stay with them, that he had to go, because the stress and strain on them as parents was greater with him in the home than it was with him out. I discovered that about parenting. If my child comes home and is a troubled child, grown, and they come home every day, it is pressure in the home. But when my child lived out on their own, even though they may be doing things that I'm not pleased of, it's a different level of pressure. It is me now just praying God protect them. But when they're in my home, it's me not sleeping. It's me waiting for that key to go in the door. Is me. It's a different level. So it was better for me to have my child live away than it was to live in my place, still struggling. So it can be a balance, because that stress will kill you. It will cause ill health. It'll cause bad health. And I'm gonna tell you how it was. I remember my kids shared with me once when they heard my wife and I disagreeing. Kids were standing outside the room deciding which one they're gonna go with. Okay? Children are selfish. Children don't care that they cause you to argue or to have a dispute. They don't care. They care about what they can get. So we had to come to terms to realize I might be a parent, but this little thing can be a little sneaky, all right, because it's looking out for itself. And you hope that at some point they value and recognize the significance of having parents. But if they get those habits and things, they're still selfish and they care about themselves more so than they would care about you and your marriage.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I know that we just were beginning and starting. I hear, yes, I hear it's going to cut off. Nelson, are you able to come in? It's going to cut off at 5. I was thinking it could maybe prolong a little, but I hear it's going to cut off at 5, and I wouldn't want us to go without a conclusion. I would like to thank Nelson from Dell Methods and Eastern Graphics for hosting us. I know this topic was just like a scratch on the surface, and I'm hoping that I can invite all of you back so that we can really go into a question and answer session with everybody, because I'm sure people have questions and they want to, speak a little bit more. I am thankful for the vulnerability, the openness, the sharing that you did, giving us very, very candid information. And I do hope that we can be back again. Mr. Nelson, so there's no way we can, it's going to be over in less than a minute?
No. Let's play the video first, and then I think they can stay on.
Oh, okay, wonderful, because I want us to conclude properly. I didn't want us to just run out. Okay, thank you.
All right, let's
go ahead and play the video.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sister Angela, I'm interested in learning about your rites of passage. So would it be okay if Ms. Namsa shared your contact with me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you on the other side.
All right, we'll wait for the video.
Let's face it, your church has so much going on. Worship, fellowship, discipleship, community, ministry, missions, and on and on. In most cases, these tasks have to be done by volunteer church members and leaders who also have other responsibilities at home and work. Tell me if this sounds like you. Your team works so hard on a project. You spend a lot of money and hours planning and making sure everything goes as planned. The day of the event comes, and nobody shows up. You and your team get frustrated and discouraged, and you feel like throwing in the towel. Sound like you? Well, your problem is not isolated. In fact, there are a lot of dedicated people like you who go through the same thing. As you can see, this is a really big problem. But there's good news. There's a solution, and it's a lot easier than you think. Let me explain. You see, the world is changing, and so is the way we consume and distribute the gospel and information. People now only consume or attend events that solve one or more of their problems. The problem is that we create content or events based on what we think the people will need and not what they actually need. But then we quickly find out the opposite when they don't show up to our events or when they don't consume our content. The question is, how do we know what our members' needs are, and how do we meet everyone's needs? Great question. I'm sure you've heard people say things like, you can't please everyone, right? But as a church or ministry, the message you hold is meant for everyone, right? And it is our duty to make sure that everyone gets it. You see, the secret to effective evangelism is the same as it was 2,000 years ago. The secret? Know your audience. Discover their needs and pain points. Segment them into groups according to their needs. Figure out the solution to their problem and prescribe the right solution. There are so many great examples of this formula being played out in the Bible, but we are going to look at one: the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus knew exactly who this woman was. He knew her name, her personal life, her needs, and her struggles. He even knew the exact time she went to the well. When Jesus approached the woman, he did it when she was alone at the well. Because Jesus knew her well, he was able to prescribe the right solution to her problem, and what happened after was simply a miracle. She went out and brought everyone to Jesus. In this example, Jesus shows us the power of meeting people's needs and helping them solve their greatest struggles and pain points. You see, without a process, we run a risk of forcing people to consume that which we think they need. The result? 57% of young people who grew up in the church have left the church. Only 42% of adults attend church on a regular basis. Have you heard the new term, religious nuns? For the first time in history, there are more people who claim no affiliation to any organized religion than there are Catholics. What do all of these people have in common? The church is not meeting their needs. That's why we created the Dell Method, a process used by churches, faith-based nonprofits, and solo evangelists to discover what their audience needs, figure out the solution, and best mode of distribution. The Dell Method is simple to implement, and you will get immediate results. Above all, your members and the larger world Christian community will thank you. Implement the Dell Method today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Eastern Media, for everything. I hope everyone was inspired by that little video and what Nelson is doing. Hopefully you guys can engage him sometime.
I'm
Now,
just disappointed that he has never called me about it.
Nelson, you have to answer to that with Pastor Edwards. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to summarize, and we're going to have each and every speaker. I just want you, 2-3 minutes. What is your message to the parent? You're looking at the difficulties parents are having with parenting issues, disappointments with maybe expectations and, things that they thought would be and were not. Or, how can you help? What is your message to them, really? What is your message to them? How can you encourage them as they go through this situation? Sister Angela, I also want you to add a little bit of, information, resources, anything about that you could add to that as you talk. So starting with Dr. Chongo, please give us a summary of, just advise the parents. What do you think would be good in this situation?
I don't know. I'm getting the feedback. I don't know what I can say can make even any sense. This is my take.
Mm-hmm.
That we are living in very difficult times, and salvation is by families. Noah was saved with his family. Lot was saved with his family. Abraham was saved with his family. Israel was saved with his family. Rahab was saved with her family. It is really difficult, particularly when you think about the pressures that the young people are facing. But this is what, from my point of view and my experience, that especially if the young people are with you, there should be a time every day where you have to meet together, either for a meal or just Bible study. And that is the time that everybody puts their guards down and they just talk about life. We are so busy, trying to meet life that we forget to live a life. That does two things. I think if we are going to listen and listen very carefully from what every member is contributing that time, some of the pressures that we faced probably could not be faced. But the interesting thing, though, is that I think if we start early and we do our choice and we provide choices, people are going to choose. Children are going to choose. They're individuals. The only thing is that we try to provide an environment where they can thrive, whatever way they want to thrive. But I think really there should be a time when we meet as a family. What I've found is that, the fridge, somebody comes, takes something, they go to their room. You don't know what they're thinking and doing in their room. Somebody comes, they do the same thing, they go to their room, and there is no time that this family really sits down to even question some of the things that they should be questioning.
Thank you. Pastor Edwards?
Well, for the most part is understand that parenting is difficult. And as many books and things that you may read, when you're facing a real person in a real situation, those dynamics change. However, the best example that I always draw on is the relationship that Christ has with us. That it is promising and punitive. It's both. It's not either or. But balancing that punitiveness is what we struggle with as human beings. How much do we take? Raising a daughter is a little different than raising a son. Honestly, I would put a son out and he can sleep in his car. But I can't do that with a daughter. It's this challenge. There's this thing, because I believe that son will end up getting so frustrated that he knows I got to do something because I don't want to go back in daddy's house. All right. With my parents, as I said, I had to intervene because it was killing them. And I had to make it where my brother no longer could live with my parents. And he has not lived there for years. He moved out of state. And my mother and my father slept. Were they still concerned about him? Yes. But there's a difference when they're in your house. That's why that prodigal father was like, carry your butt out. Hey, I almost rather you be gone than to be sitting here disrespecting me. But yet when he found himself, the father said, the door is wide open. I never said you were no longer my son. You said that. So it's a balance. But in the end, you can put your children in God's hand, do what Dr. Chango said, have those conversations, do what Sister Angela said, ask questions, try to find out where they're headed rather than directing it, ask questions. I think it's a combination of all of this.
Okay. Sister Angela?
Yes. I would just encourage parents, caregivers in the community, in the village that we can trust, to be okay to reassess your values, your expectations of your kids, and provide that non-judgmental zone for communicating, as Dr. Madandi said, having a place and a time to connect on a regular basis. Kids need that from 0 to the time that, we need that as humans. So make sure that we're making those connections, that non-judgmental zones to connect. And be amazed with who your kids are. Don't be disappointed, or find another place to deal with your disappointment, and you can communicate that with your children, but not to have the expectation that they're necessarily going to change, but they will be informed that you are disappointed. Help with the solution. I think that's really important. And know that you as a parent are the example. So if you're living a wholesome, healthy, satisfied life, you are going to be encouragement, a motivation to your child. And if they want to be miserable, that's their choice. But if you're living a well-rounded life, you're going to make a difference for your child. And, have a circle where you can talk, where you can, even in a platform like this, understand that you're not dealing with something that's isolated. Everyone's dealing with issues with their children. You're not alone. And, there are support. Get that support in various ways, whether you need to have your own mental health services or your own circle of support. But talk about the issue for your own satisfaction, not so much to change the child. So that would be my encouragement. Know that you deserve a respite from the drama of raising children and make that happen for yourself.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I hear, boundaries have been emphasized. The issue that at the end of the day, boundaries have to be emphasized, especially with when a child is or a son, daughter is not doing well, and there's need for boundaries have to be set. I hear respect, I hear unconditional love, all those things are very important. And that God is a God of, there are consequences to everything that we do. It's not like, so at the end of the day, as parents, we have to be, helpful to our children. We have to be, love them unconditionally. But at the end of the day, consequences are always going to come. I mean, because, whenever something is done, whether it's good or bad, there's always a consequence to it. I just want to thank all the speakers for joining me today. It's unfortunate we lost Dr. Zemiri because of connection issues, but I am just thankful for all the inputs that we got, because this was a good icebreaker. I'm hoping that every month, once a month, we're going to have some negotiating and maintaining relationship series, and that we can discuss different issues. There's marital, there is parental relationships, there is friend relationship, there is all kinds of relationships are different. And so we would like to tackle those once in a while, different types of relationships, and hope that we can help our community grow together in unity and in love as we wait for God's kingdom to come, so that we can all we can end this earthly world and enjoy with our Lord. But right now, while we're still on earth, let's figure out ways of living together that are very productive and helpful. Thank you, Dr. Mundende. Thank you, Sister Angela. Thank you, Pastor Roberts. Everybody, thank you so much for joining our session, and I hope you look forward to more sessions to come. This was the first time, so please bear with us. I know there were some kinks here and there. So I know people will be like, oh yeah, volume this and that, please bear with me. It's the first time, and we will be working on whatever we need to work on to kind of improve the sessions and make sure that everybody is tuning in without any problem.
You did a wonderful job. So I can tell you, I didn't know it was the first time.
No.
It is, but this is the first episode of my maintaining and negotiating relationships. So I'm hoping that we can continue, and I hope that you will, join me sometime, because I'm sure people still have questions, and I hope that we can do this again sometime so that we can kind of answer people's questions in a much open forum. Thank you so much. I'm going to go into the lounge now, and if anyone wants to go in there and wants to ask a few questions, I'll go around all the different tables for a minute, and then after that we'll be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no idea.
He said something about the table. I don't know. How do we get back to the table?
Nelson, can you take us to the lounge or to the backstage or what? I don't know where we go from here.